Let's see it.
Hi, guys. We are live again one more time. I hope you can hear me fine. We're we're in a state of flux here at the Rouse House. Some of you that were watching last time know we moved to a new location, and we still haven't got everything set up. So I'm just piecing together everything here. So I'm hoping everything's working right. Sounds okay on my end, but who knows? Others will be joining us here momentarily. First off, we want to say Happy New Year. It is 2022. God, that just sounds weird, doesn't it? I mean, of course, I'm old school, and I remember thinking the year 2000 was just so far off in the future. So, but like I said, some others will be joining us. I know Lewis is going to be a little late. Tim should be joining us here momentarily. And so we'll be getting things going there. But remember, we are live and we provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers. And we thank you to those that are watching. We've already got a comment. Hey, Greg, Happy New Year to you too. Hope things are going well up in Cleveland. It is hot down here. I mean, it's like over 80 degrees today. but then tomorrow it's supposed to drop down. Tomorrow night it's supposed to drop down to about freezing. So we'll have some of your weather pretty quick here. But we will provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers. We thank you for watching. We do this for your entertainment. We are not by any means and do not claim to be scholars or experts in any of the topics that we cover. We're simply enthusiasts and storytellers who we just like to have fun with these topics, and we do it while respecting individual beliefs. We don't want to spurn anybody's personal belief systems. And please remember, like I said, this is live and nothing is rehearsed or edited out later. The only caveat is we do edit the revisit shows because the streaming service we use, StreamYard, only allows an hour for pre-recorded videos. So anyway, we're going to go on into the show and get started. Like I said, Lynn and I have had some crazy things going on, and we've been out and about all day today. And then I rush back in here to try to get all this hooked up because I don't have my studio set back up yet in our new location. But anyway, you can see behind me, I've got our Strange Journeys YouTube page set up there. See? Strange Journeys. So please join us on YouTube and like and subscribe and all that kind of good stuff. Where'd I put that here? Yeah, here it is.
Click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
Yes, please do. And you'll recognize it there. That's what it looks like when you see it. And so if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please like the video. Please share the video. And let us know you are watching. We've already had Greg chime in from Cleveland, and we appreciate that. And which, let me say to all Ohioans, it was a tough game yesterday when Alabama beat Cincinnati. But there were a couple of times I thought Cincinnati was going to take off and run with it. I don't know what happened. Maybe Alabama's defense was too strong, but they had the skills and they put up a good fight. and it was a good game. But I do apologize to all the Ohioans. Sorry. But it was a fun game. We got to sit and watch that yesterday. Hey, we do this for you, like I said, and it takes a little bit of money, but not a lot. And oops, somebody's commented again. Hey, Dan from Virginia, appreciate you joining us. Yeah, if you're on Facebook, for some reason in the group, it asks you to go to their site. There's a link up above this where if you click on that, it will give them permission to use your name. And thank you for putting your name on that, because on my end it just says Facebook user. So Dan, I appreciate you being here, man. I hope you enjoy it. We're going to have other folks joining me here pretty soon. I'm not sure when, but they said we'll be a little bit late, so we're trying to get all that worked out. But we do want your all right. As little as $5 a month, I think it is, for a little bit of help. Every little bit helps, and we appreciate it, so we can bring you more and more. What's happened here? Oh, it's going to my screensaver because I had our YouTube channel playing. Let me do this. There we go. There's our YouTube channel back. Hey, 2 weeks ago we had our creepy Christmas show, and had some dark tales, creepy Christmas stories, and how many of you just loved the dramatic reading of that creepy Christmas poem at the beginning by Lewis Powell IV? That was awesome. But I mean, he's a trained actor, and has worked in theater for years, and he just did an amazing job. Go back and watch that. That was so cool. I've gone back just to watch that little bit a couple times because it was so awesome. But then last weekend we were dark because it was Christmas. But the week before that, we did our revisited show, Angels Among Us 1 and 2. Because again, like our revisit shows, like I said, we do a pre-recorded broadcast. And so we'd done our Krampus show, parts 1 and 2, and then our Angels Among Us 1 and 2 the Saturday before Christmas. And I loved that show. That was awesome. I mean, the different stories of the angels, and then I shared the story of my daughter and what she says to this day was her guardian angel. I thought that was just an amazing, amazing story that I got to be a witness to. And so it was, it was mind blowing. You know, I look up to thank this woman that had found my daughter, and she's nowhere to be found. It was amazing. And then I shared my story of my near drowning experience in the Virgin Islands. And while I do not know if it was an angel, but it had a lot of the earmarks of what angel encounters provide, and, you know, so yeah, go back and watch those. Those are pretty cool. And as a matter of fact, our entire first season, I've removed it from YouTube because we're going back and doing these revisits. And so I add a little bit to the intro to tell a little bit about what the show is. So go back and watch those. We'll be adding some more within the next few weeks and months, and you can see our entire first season, hopefully within the next few months, on the revisited shows. So those would be pretty cool. We got the Black Eyed Kids coming up. I think we already did the Hat Man, but the abduction show, oh, that one was cool. Some of our Bigfoot shows, our other ghost hunting shows, we've already done one ghost hunting show on there. So, you'll be able to catch up on all of our first year, which it's kind of hard to believe, but we've already been doing this 2 years, coming up on 2 years. And that's amazing. We've got some great friends we've made through all this. Now, please remember to visit our merch site, strangestuff.live. That's another way you can support the show. And you can even get you a shirt that says you're a watcher. I'm a watcher. And where's that other one? Oh, there's a pillow. We got pillows and coffee mugs and T-shirts, you name it, on there. All kind of cool stuff. Now, we are going into a strange new year. Most people will agree that 2021 was strange in and of itself. It was definitely one for the books, and we're glad it's over. Lynn and I had a lot of personal things, events and adventures we didn't want to go on that we had to take. And we're glad it's over, and we hope things level out now. I woke up this morning equating it to earthquakes, where we had this small tremor that disrupted everything. And then a few months later, a massive earthquake that almost destroyed us and destroyed a lot of things around us. And then we had another earthquake, and then we had another earthquake. And so we're just waiting for the seismic activity to cease. So, but on the good news, Lynn had the wreck a couple of weeks ago. We did get her a replacement vehicle today, and that's where she's been. She's coming in from that right now. And so she's been out to pick up the car. So anyway, we got that going, and so hopefully things are smoothing out now, and that's what we're looking forward to. All right, as we go into the strange new year, we want to look back for just a second at some events that have happened around this time of year, December 31st, January 1st. And first off, we want to look at December 31st, some things throughout history that were unique and stood out as we were doing research. December 31st, 1735, Paul Revere was born. But several years later, on 1782, Johann Christian Bach died. But in 1879, this is all on December 31st, Thomas Edison gave the first public demonstration of the electric incandescent light bulb. In 1904, the first New Year's Eve celebration was held in Times Square in New York City. And I'm sure most of you probably watched it on TV last night. And that's always kind of unique, and I've watched it before, but last night, Lynn and I were watching old John Wayne movies, and I was seeing some cool ones. Well, I'm not going to go into that. We were just watching old John Wayne movies. IMDb TV's got a channel or whatever, a show now called John Wayne Season 1, John Wayne Movies Season 1, and it's just one movie after another. Hey, it was cool, but I'm a fan. In 1916, Gregory Rasputin was assassinated by a group of conservative noblemen who opposed his influence over Alexandra and Nicholas. He's the dude with the long beard and long hair. Basically, he was the rock star of the early 1900s. He was had a reputation. Let's just put it that way. In 1938, the first breath test for drivers, called the Drunkometer, was introduced in Indianapolis. In 1946, President Truman officially proclaimed the end of hostilities in World War II. And sadly, in 1985, singer Rick Nelson, who was 45 at the time, and 6 other people were killed when a fire broke out aboard the DC-3 they were traveling on, going to a New Year's Eve celebration in Dallas. And I'm sure you've all heard the news by now, but yesterday, on December the 31st, 2021, we had our latest celebrity casualty. television icon Betty White passed away at 99 years old. And I was telling the guys in the ETs, what was just weird about that is just the night before, Lynn and I had sat down and found a documentary on Netflix about her and just loved it. I mean, we had a blast watching that show and enjoyed the show. And then the next day we get the news. We're like, wow, that's freaky. And Lynn kind of made the suggestion. I wonder if, maybe she had already passed and they just hadn't released the news yet. I don't know. Sometimes that happens. All right. January 1, 1818, Mary Shelley published the book Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's Monster. In 1863, Emancipation Proclamation was issued. In 1896, physicist Wilhelm Röntgen announced to the world that he had successfully taken the world's first X-ray. Now, I'm bringing these up because they're just kind of odd and off the beaten path. I didn't put in there that China's Republic of China was formed on this day, and political stuff that we really don't, just stuff that stands out. In 1907, now this was just a strange one. President Theodore Roosevelt shook a record of 8,513 hands at the New Year's function at the White House. God, can you imagine how tired his hand was? In 1934, the island of Alcatraz becomes a federal prison. In 1953, and we've talked about this on the show before, country music legend Hank Williams died. Yeah, there I go. I got to change my screensaver on this. There, we're back. I saw it flop off behind me. Country music legend Hank Williams died in 1962. This was amazing. I did not know this one. But the Beatles auditioned for Decca Records and are turned down by the label. Don't you know they were kicking themselves the next few years? Okay, in 1968, Evel Knievel fails in his attempt to jump the Caesars Palace fountain in Las Vegas, crashes, breaking just about every bone in his body. I mean, I remember watching videos of that. Of course, I was only like 4 years old, so I didn't really notice it on TV. But of course, a few years later, when I was 8, 10, 12 years old, I had the little Evel Knievel thing. They were starting to resell it, actually. The exact same toy, looks like. Evel Knievel on a motorcycle, and you put him in this base, and you wind it up, and you stop it and let it go, and he flies down. Anyway, but that's one of the most iconic Evel Knievel videos of him crashing. 1977, while imprisoned in Colorado, Ted Bundy uses the fact that the employees of the jailhouse there were on Christmas and New Year's break to his advantage. He broke out while many of the jailer's employees were away, including the chief jailer. And in 2018, some of you will appreciate this. In 2018, cannabis is legalized for recreational use in California just a few years ago. Now, we're going to look back at some of the New Year's traditions throughout the world that are just kind of strange. And then I'm going to share some stories with you. Oh gosh, we've had a little minor emergency. Tim's not going to be able to be with us. Just found out that he's had to take his wife to the ER. Nothing life-threatening. Just something flared up. He had to call an ambulance. So let's see. Yeah, last time he wasn't able to be on the show because he had lost his voice. So I'm just saying, I hope you're better soon. Hope she's better soon. Anyway, And Lewis had already contacted me, said he was going to be running late, but we've got some more folks coming on the show. Lewis wants to talk about some traditions, so I know he's going to make it. But as we were scouring the intranet and the World Wide Web, we were looking for just strangeness, for unusual things. And we come across some traditions that, I mean, if you're of these persuasions, we're not making fun of them. We're just highlighting them that they're unusual, and just kind of strange. Not bad, not wrong. Of course, we like the strange here, right? In Italy, they throw furniture out the window on New Year's Day. And it's actually meant to symbolize getting rid of the old and accepting the new, including furniture, books, pots, pans, dishes, and old clothes. Hopefully they got a good job where they can replace all that. In Venice, Italy, thousands of people gather in the Piazza San Marco, where it's believed that a kiss in Venice will bring you happiness in the year ahead. Now, I've heard of the kiss at midnight, and anyway, this may be where it came from. But also, a lot of people in Italy wear red underwear on New Year's night. Now, how would they know? Unless they're told, and unless, like the trend a few years back, Madonna was going around wearing her underwear out in front of everybody. So, but in Italy, that's supposedly a thing on New Year's Eve, is to wear red underwear. In Europe, that's the European tradition is the Yule log, and we most commonly associate that with Christmas, but it's just part of the whole celebration. But they burn the Yule log on New Year's Day, and the ashes are then spread on the windows and door seals to keep evil spirits and fae from entering the home. Now, here's one that harkens back to our Christmas show, Creepy Christmas, Perchtenlaufen. And I believe that has something to do with Perchta that we talked about, that Lewis told us about. But this Perchtenlaufen is a folk custom found in the Tyrol region of Central Europe. It occurs on set occasions. The ceremony involves two groups of locals fighting against each other using wooden canes and sticks. Both groups are masked. One side is the beautiful and one side is the ugly. I don't know who decides that, but they fight. In China, the Nian, a traditional Chinese monster that terrorized the villages during the Chinese New Year, was known to burn the villages and fields, and any child found alone outside would disappear when Nian came, never to be seen again. To remedy this, the Chinese began painting the buildings red and wearing red clothing around during the New Year to make Nian believe that he had already burned the village. Okay, so wear your red clothes on New Year's to make sure Nian just goes about his business and doesn't deal with your village. All right, in Spain, as I thought this one was hilarious because I've seen kids do it, and I probably did it as a kid. As midnight approaches, everyone's busy counting out 12 grapes apiece. You need to eat one of those 12 grapes with every strike of the bell at midnight. In other words, as it's striking, 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. So everyone is eating their grapes at the same time. Some people try and stuff all 12 grapes into their mouths without eating them, but some try and bite them in half and swallow them down so they can get them down quicker. So it seems if you get all 12 down before the new year, you will have a more prosperous new year. It seems it started back in 1909 when there was a bumper harvest of grapes and crafty farmers were trying to figure out how to sell more of them. So they were just trying to be here. Buy more grapes. You need them for the New Year's. I mean, most people don't have people like grapes anyway. Most people do. I don't think I've ever met anybody that didn't like grapes. All right, odd traditions in Germany. There are two weird New Year's traditions in Germany. The first is lead pouring, which is also popular in Finland. Each person melts a small piece of lead or tin over a candle and pours it into a container of cold water. The shape it forms is meant to reveal that person's fate for the year ahead. I guess it's like reading tea leaves or something along that line. Another thing is the Krapfen, a German donut. It's usually chocolate or jam filled, but sometimes filled with mustard as a prank. So you're supposed to eat these things. The chocolate or jam would be nice, but yeah, it would be kind of rough to get a hold of one with mustard. All right, in Denmark, on New Year's, it's traditional to throw plates and dishes against your friends and neighbors' front doors. The bigger the pile next morning, the more luck you'll have during the year. I guess it'll show you have a lot of friends. The more plates you have, the more friends you have, I guess. In Scotland, the first person to cross your threshold after midnight on New Year's is thought to be an omen for the years ahead. The best person to enter your house to guarantee good luck is thought to be a tall, dark-haired man bearing gifts like coins, bread, or whiskey. And it's thought that this dates back to Viking times when fair-haired strangers meant nothing but trouble. So they didn't want the tall Viking coming in. They wanted that tall, dark-haired man. In Romania, there are ceremonies celebrating death and rebirth, and people dance dressed in furs and masks, which is believed to ward off evil spirits. In Holland, a tasty tradition in Holland is eating the donut-like balls known as oliebollen. And I may not be pronouncing that right, so forgive me if I'm not, or if I am pronouncing it incorrectly. Let me get my grammar straight there. Oliebollen. Apparently, and bizarrely, ancient Germanic tribes would eat them during the Yule period to protect them from the goddess Perchta, which we've already talked about, who would try to punish them by cutting their stomachs open if they hadn't taken part in Yuletide cheer. So today they're just enjoying it on New Year's Eve. In Ireland, single women hoping to find love in the new year traditionally sleep with mistletoe under their pillow on New Year's Eve instead of hanging from the ceiling under their pillows. Now, I'll probably come back to this one when Lewis gets on. But in southern states, we have the tradition of eating greens, Hoppin' John, black-eyed peas, which I found out that Hoppin' John is like a little salsa type thing made with peas and other things. Cornbread and pot liquor soup. And if you don't know what pot liquor soup is, then you've never had greens. So that's the juice that cooks down from that. All right. Like I said, as soon as Lewis gets on, where he wants to talk about some of these Southern traditions because he has done a lot of research into that. But I want to tell you, first off, I want to tell you a ghost story. And then a couple other things. That these things happened on the New Year, on December 31st, or New Year's Day, or were influenced by that day in some way. You'll see what I mean in this first one. This first one didn't necessarily take place on New Year's Day, but, excuse me, this Joanne Smith shared this story. It was published in Ghost Stories in 1988, but We found it at the old house online. And she tells about she had just bought this little bungalow in Pomona. Where did I say that was? Yeah, Indiana. And it was everything that she had dreamed of. It was, what did she say, the 50s style. And she said it was, but the yard was overgrown. And for her, that was perfect. She didn't know until after she had bought it that 8 families had moved in and out of there in the past 5 years. The reason why it was clear to me on the first days of occupancy. My daughter and son-in-law had helped me move, and they spent the night in her bedroom while she crashed on the couch in the den. And over breakfast, her daughter began to scold her for getting up and hanging pictures during the night. When I told her I hadn't got out of bed, she just laughed with an, "Oh, Mom, I heard you pounding the nails." Later in the day, alone, I passed my open bedroom door, and standing in the doorway with his hand on the door was an old man, about 70, over 6 feet tall, with salt and pepper hair, wearing a plaid flannel shirt and bib overalls. I saw him clearly, but knew he wasn't real. Then he vanished, like someone had just erased him from the bottom up. For some reason, I wasn't frightened. Over the next 2 years, Mr. Price, as I had come to find out what his name was, made life miserable for a half dozen people in my home. Our son-in-law refused to be in the house alone, even in broad daylight. A young lady who stayed for one vacation was angry that I hadn't told her about him. So, okay, we got somebody coming in. There's Lewis.
Hello.
Lewis, how you doing?
Well.
Good. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Thank you. And I'm glad you made it. Everything okay?
Yes.
Okay.
My
Go ahead.
partner just needed food at work.
Not a problem.
Didn't contact me until a little later. So, yeah.
Okay. Waited too late, huh?
Yes.
Well,
I had told him I was doing this afternoon, but he didn't.
Wasn't
he
cognizant.
kind of forgot about that.
Wasn't cognizant of the time. Well, that's like we. I rushed to make it back here by 2:00, and we had after Lynn's car wreck, my sister-in-law gave us her car, which was with somebody else, and we've been trying to get it back from him for 2 or 3 weeks, and we finally got everything worked out where we could go get it this morning. So we rushed over there this morning, and he hadn't even cleaned out the car, so we had to help him clean out the car. And I'm like, I gotta go. So we're rushing, getting everything out, and she just came in a few minutes ago and snuck by me as she's gotten back from she was doing some running around. But
I hope she's feeling better.
She is. She had a follow-up with the doctor. They did a bone scan and found that there were ribs cracked and her spine was cracked. Yeah, so no wonder she was in a lot of pain, but she is doing better. So she'll keep progressing. I mean, she did okay driving today. I was kind of concerned about that. And, driving again after a wreck. I had her out in my truck last weekend, just getting used to it. So, and Tim, just a few minutes ago, I don't know if you saw the message in the group, but he's had to take his wife to the ER. So, anyway, strange new year. I had just started telling the ghost story of Mr. Price.
Okay.
And I don't know if you got your outline up there.
I'll have to pull it up.
I had to. And that's another thing. We still haven't gotten everything organized here, so I still don't have my office and my studio set up. And so I was trying to get everything set up today where I could use a separate monitor with my laptop and do all this kind of stuff, and nothing worked. And so I did find my headset with my microphone on it. So there's that. But nothing else that I was trying to make the situation a little better was working. And so I was rushing trying to get all that done. But anyway, we'll go on with Mr. Price.
Okay.
And that was another thing. I was wanting to set up a separate monitor with the outline, because doing it here, the screen where you and I are at is about that big.
Oh.
trying to see everything.
Oh, Lord.
But anyway, Mr. Price, this lady Joanne, just to catch you up, had moved into her dream home in Pomona, Indiana. Isn't that where it was?
Okay.
Yes. And first night there, her daughter was awakened by someone pounding on the walls. So then over the next couple of years, he began to manifest with some different things. Her son-in-law wouldn't stay in the house. One lady got angry because she wasn't told about him. There was the sound of boxes crashing off the closet shelves. And the closet doors, which stuck and were hard to open, would sometimes swing freely back and forth. Now, she says there wasn't ever anything out of place, but we were always treated with the most awful crashing sounds. The sound of a huge ceiling fan smashing through the glass top of the dining room table would send everyone running into the dining room, only to discover that it was still securely fastened to the ceiling. That was a favorite trick of his. He also made the sound of a cast iron kettle dropping from a height of 6 or 8 feet. Every night for weeks, I came home to find my soap in the bathtub floating in a couple of inches of water. So we've got some serious, playful poltergeist activity, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And as I said in the beginning, none of this necessarily happens on January 1st of the new year, but you'll see where it ties in here in a minute. She says, living alone, I started to speak to this man, Mr. Price, out loud, feeling like a fool. I'd say, don't do that. Soap is expensive. So the soap stopped. One night after going to bed, I felt someone lift the blankets. I sat up in bed and shouted, now that's too close. And it never happened again. It seems that Mr. Price, when flesh and blood, lived in the house next door. Now, here's where it ties in. He died on January 1, 1970, of apparent suicide. My neighbor told me about Mr. Price after I started asking odd questions. I asked if she knew what he looked like. She didn't, but said she'd find out from other neighbors. That night, she bolted into my house and said she was told that Mr. Price was a tall man, a farmer type, who always wore bib overalls. And that's the very thing she saw. Then I told her what I'd seen in the doorway. She said he'd been a carpenter. In fact, he had built a scaffold in the garage from which he had hanged himself. That explained the pounding sounds. She told me that sometimes when I was away for the weekend, they would hear furious hammering like a berserk carpenter coming from my home for up to 2 hours. She also admitted that they too were being visited by Mr. Price, who had a habit of being light-fingered with her husband's tools. Until one afternoon, her husband went into the garage and had a talk with Mr. Price about leaving his tools alone. And this lady says, to my knowledge, I was the only person who actually saw Mr. Price. Unless you count the afternoon when my 4-year-old grandson, after being punished by his mother, said he was going into the back bedroom to play with the grandfather. Mr. Price's visits became less and less frequent as the remodeling on my home neared completion. I guess he was happy with the job I was doing and finally stopped coming altogether. I have since moved back to Indiana and am currently remodeling and restoring a 1926 beauty. But you know what? I miss Mr. Price. So,
wow.
It sounded like it was a positive but frustrating.
Yes.
it wasn't evil or bad,
Right.
but it was strange. So, before we go on to any stories, I briefly touched on some Southern traditions, Lewis, and I know you wanted to talk about some of that.
Yes. Yes.
So before we go into that, you got to tell us about your meal.
Well, I had I went out and bought everything yesterday with the full intention of preparing lunch today, and then I kind of didn't have any motivation this morning, and then so I'm still planning on making it. I'm just going to make it for dinner, but this is a very Southern tradition of there's a traditional New Year's meal, and this meal always includes pork as the protein, and the whole reason that this meal is put together is to encourage prosperity.
Right.
And looking back on it, I can't think of any other holiday meals that we have, especially here in the South, where the meal is actually a ritual. And by eating these very specific, very symbolic foods,
Right.
you are encouraging prosperity through what is essentially spell work. Which I think is kind of interesting
That is true.
when you start to think of, just how devoutly Christian the South can be.
Exactly.
But
Bible Belt.
yes, and the whole reason for the inclusion of pork is that pigs are supposedly, when they forage forward, so that this is symbolic of progressive or forward motion. So you'll always have pork as the protein, and then various sides. Usually there is some type of greens, either collard greens or mustard greens or turnip greens. And the greens, because they are leafy greens, they are symbolic of paper currency. And so you also will traditionally have black-eyed peas. And black-eyed peas have been brought to us from the African tradition by enslaved people. And the reason black-eyed peas are encouraged is because the peas swell when you cook them. So it's this idea of becoming fat with prosperity. And then you also include cornbread, which cornbread is used for its golden color, of course, representing money and gold and so forth. So what I have in mind to prepare, I've got some smoked pork loin. So I'll have that along with mustard greens and black-eyed peas. And I'm also making cornbread, as well as I've got carrot coins. So, of course, these golden colored carrots, also represent currency. So, even though I'm not a big fan of really black-eyed peas, I will eat them and hope for a more prosperous new year.
Yes. Well, it's I as an adult, I've heard all these things. And I was raised in the heart of the South. I was raised on a farm in South Mississippi. You can't get much more Southern than that.
Yeah, deep South.
Yeah, greens, black-eyed peas, pot liquor, cornbread, all of that were staple foods growing up. But for some reason, my family never participated with the New Year's. I never heard any of this growing up. I don't understand. I mean, because once I got to be an adult and got out moving into the world and learning and growing, I heard about this Southern tradition, and other people I know talk about growing up eating all this, and I'm like, for some reason, my family didn't. So, and
Well, wasn't your father a Baptist preacher?
well, he was Methodist, but
Methodist. Okay.
yeah, but I mean, I never picked up any issues. I mean, because he loved taking the cornbread and dipping it in the pot liquor. Okay.
Mhm. Oh,
he
yeah.
he was a Southern boy.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, when I was a kid, the only way I could eat black-eyed peas, my mama would take a tablespoon of mayonnaise and mix it up with it. Now, some people get grossed out by that, but as a kid, that's the only way I could eat peas. Now, as an adult, of course, you grow and you learn to eat things, and now I can eat all this and enjoy it.
Yeah.
The greens, you got to have pepper sauce, so you got to have the bottle
Oh,
of
of course.
the
Of
the
course.
peppers and the vinegar and the hot sauce,
Mhm.
and so, and the Hoppin' John looks pretty good.
Mhm.
My wife's family, they don't necessarily participate in it, but it's there.
Mhm.
Like we were over yesterday for the game, and I've already apologized to our Ohioan friends for Alabama beating Cincinnati last night. But as we were over for the game, my mother-in-law and my wife's aunt was telling us that next day, today, they were going to have their greens and their Hoppin' John and the
Mhm.
cornbread, and they were going to have all that today. So I just am. I'm not upset. I'm just kind of like, okay, we didn't do these. We didn't follow these traditions
Right.
growing up.
Right.
But I'd never heard the explanations you gave on them. And I mean, I can see it.
Mhm.
Not that I'm necessarily into the what you said, the incantation side of it, spell
Mhm.
casting. It's when you put it like that, it does sound like that, Lewis.
But then again, I mean, the whole idea behind most spells is to simply come with and do this ritual, however you do it, with
Mhm.
intention.
Yeah.
And if you go in with the intention, then you are, creating a spell.
Participating. Yep, exactly. That's true. And so you're going to be spell casting tonight, huh?
Yes, yes. Over my stove.
Yes, casting a spell of good fortune for the
Yes.
next year. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, when you put it in certain terms like that, some people might have a problem with it,
Mhm.
but it's just omens for good year. That's what we're looking
Yes.
for. That we're so glad for 2021 to be over.
Yes, indeed.
So, and all right. So, is there a dessert planned?
No.
Okay. Okay.
I'm
Well,
diabetic, so
oh,
I usually have to avoid that.
I understand.
Unfortunately.
My dad was diabetic, and two of my children.
Oh.
Well, my one remaining child is still diabetic, but
Oh.
so I understand. I was raised with it, so I do. I mean, though it was unique as a kid to have a diabetic dad because you had to have sweets around the house
Oh yeah.
in case his blood sugar dropped.
Mhm.
So we always knew there was a treat around the house somewhere. We couldn't eat it all. We had to leave some for Daddy if he needed it, but we knew where to find them. All right, some more strangeness. Um, uh, you know, trying to track down specific dates for a lot of this was kind of tough. I mean, I came across the ghost story that was connected
Mhm.
to January 1. We've already talked about the deaths and the births. Lewis, I did mention earlier
Okay.
that the death yesterday that shocked the world. Um, Betty White passing away,
Yes.
and I mean, and how I had just the night before, Lynn and I had watched the documentary on Netflix about her and loved
Mhm.
it. And
Well, roommate and I happened to watch the final episode of Golden Girls just on the 30th.
Wow.
So, it was just very sad that
Yeah,
he died the next day.
that was strange. And they were all, I mean, because I had just been reading this week how they were planning her 100th birthday party
Mhm. Yes.
and was
yes.
looking forward to whatever she did, whatever craziness she came up with. Because, it would be a humdinger.
Yes, indeed.
She was just a fun lady. Reminded me of my wife's grandmother in a lot of ways. And we got to see her yesterday and for Christmas. So, but we want to go into some more strangeness before we run out of time. And we thank you, watchers, for hanging with us. And it's all loosey goosey. I have an outline, but you know me, I can go in a different direction sometimes. So, but in 2013, the BFRO, if you're not sure, if you don't remember, that's the Bigfoot Research Organization, reported that in Erie County, Ohio, I was hoping Andrea could be on with us today and talk about this one. A tree trimmer in Ohio on January 1, he reported this on January 2nd, 2013, and said, me and the crew, he's a tree trimmer, saw tracks in the snow. For sure not human. This thing had an almost 6-foot stride, and you could see the toes and the whole outline of the feet. He said, I'm 29 years old and I've hunted all my whole life. And so when it comes to tracks, I know what I'm looking at. There's no doubt in my mind that there's a Bigfoot in northern Ohio. And there were 6 or so other guys with them. But there was several of them that saw this saw the tracks come out of the woods and onto the road. And it was daylight. And there were, I think I had found some others, but I didn't get them in. But in 2015 in California, on January 1st, sightings came from all across California, including Stockton, Sacramento, and Auburn. Witnesses say they saw strange lights in the sky, lights that had nothing to do with the fireworks. A local TV station reported that people saw multiple glowing objects in the sky that night. Most witnesses shared similar stories, and they remembered seeing 4 to 6 unusual-looking lights. One witness said, I saw 6 bright orange-colored lights. They were almost like in a diamond or triangle shape. It was weird, and then they just started separating. It was bright enough to shine directly through the trees without having any problem seeing it. Whatever it was moved up and to the left. It hovered there for about 60 seconds, and then it took off at a high rate of speed. Now, I've got one from 1969 reported by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Can you read that?
Oh, yes. Let's see.
Just read the first paragraph or so, kind of give a detail about it.
At 11:59 p.m. on New Year's Eve, 1969, while the rest of British Columbia was engaged in celebrating the arrival of the new decade with hugs and kisses and copious amounts of champagne, a night shift nurse by the name of Doreen Kendall was punching in at the Cowichan District Hospital on Vancouver Island for the midnight to 8 swing. The dedicated practical nurse diligently made her rounds in the extended care unit for elderly patients with a registered nurse named Frida Wilson. When, at approximately 5 a.m, she noticed that one of her geriatric patients was stirring restlessly. Shall I continue?
Yes. I mean, this is a long one. I didn't want to read everything, but there's some details that we'll want to hit on.
Okay. Assuming that her aged patient was simply too warm, Kendall pulled back the heavy drapes in the four-bed room in order to allow a breeze into the ward. At the same time, her supervisor attended to the patient on the other side of the privacy curtains near the doorway. As soon as the nurse parted the drapes, she was suddenly startled by a dazzling light. But once her eyes adjusted to the shine, she spied something that would eternally adjust her perception of reality. Kendall described what she saw illuminating the hospital that early morning. Just as I pulled the drapes, a brilliant light hit me in the eyes. It was still dark outside, but about 60 feet away, right above the children's ward to my left, there was this object so big and bright I could see everything clearly. Kendall would go on to describe the unusual hovering object itself, which she claimed was slightly above her and approximately the width of 5 or 6 windows in the nearby
Hmm.
children's ward. This speculative measurement would put the diameter of this Saturn shaped disk at about 50 feet. Kendall gave a detailed description of the vehicle. The object was circular and had what I guess you would call a top and bottom. The bottom was silvery like metal and was shaped like a bowl. There was a string of bright lights around it like a necklace. The top was a dome made of something like glass. It was lit up from inside, and I could see right into it. As if this weren't bizarre enough, Kendall claimed that she could make out the shapes of two masculine, masked figures standing within the bubble atop the craft. One of these men seemed to be positioned behind the other and appeared to be a little smaller than the closer one, though although that might have been an issue of perspective. Both of these beings were, according to Kendall, facing to her right, looking away from the hospital. Kendall described the headgear clad, veiled, 6 foot tall humanoids in her own words. They looked like fine, tall, well built men. They were dressed in tight fitting suit of the same material that covered their heads, but their hands were bare, and I noticed how human they looked. Their flesh seemed just like ours. At this point, Kendall observed that the odd craft was tilting towards her. As it leaned forward, she spied two knee high, stool like protrusions behind the entities, and she also noticed what she described as an instrument panel, which looked as if it were made from a chrome like metallic substance. The panel, which consumed half of the space inside the UFO and loomed up practically to the peak of the dome, was filled with small, presumably navigational circles or dials of various sizes, all of which appeared to be illuminated from below. Even more intriguing, the larger being standing closest to the front of the transparent bubble seemed to have his attention consumed by the device before him, forcing the nurse to speculate that they might be experiencing some kind of engine difficulty. She would later ruminate that the reason she was so enthralled by this allegedly extraterrestrial technology was due to the fact that she came from a long line of racing car aficionados, and she was always interested in automotive and other mechanical devices. She
Okay.
said, uh,
Yeah.
uh,
I mean, this goes on and on.
oh, okay.
This is a very
Oh
detailed,
my
and
word.
it would be worth an entire show.
Yeah.
But she says she never felt any fear.
Hmm.
It was just she was enthralled by what she
Right.
was seeing, and and then after watching it for a short time, she said it rotated 5 times, then shot off like a streak. And thank you, Greg. Greg saying these are good stories. I appreciate that. we do Do try. I think I would like to revisit this one because it is
Okay.
so in depth.
Yeah.
But let's see. There were other people that witnessed that. She
Mhm.
said, I think Mrs. Wilson came in, but after the things, but it was a little too late. After it circled 4 or 5 times, it started going away farther along the by the roof. And in the vast amount of in-flight flying saucer sightings, a large percentage of them seem to indicate that stationary or hovering UFOs seem to emit considerably less light than those in flight. And Kendall was the only one of 4 witnesses to see the object before it began its revolutions. So I guess other people came in after it started spinning before it flew away.
Yeah.
The Monday following the strange sighting, Kendall claimed that the experience had left her with no anxiety at all, just the same placid feeling she had felt during the encounter.
Wow.
She said, the reason I was so terrifically interested was because I always believed there were unidentified flying objects, but now I'm absolutely convinced. Now, Wilson, the other nurse that experienced this with her, and we didn't really go into her side of the story because, like I said, this one, when I found it, I was like, oh my God, I wanted to include it, but it was like, we're going to have to probably spend a whole show just going over all the details of this one.
Right.
But Wilson didn't share her belief in UFOs, nor her easygoing demeanor in the face of these unknown visitors. When she saw the abnormal aircraft, all that rippled through her was a sense of alarm and fear. It's interesting to note the different interpretations by the different women. I mean, it just depends on your perception, you know. Travis Walton, when he was abducted, and we talked about that in our abduction show, at the time he was scared out of his wits, and which is understandable. You know, this is something so totally out of his norm. But then as he spent time going over it, as he spent time going over it through the years, he's realized that it was not a fearful experience. And in his opinion, he's totally and radically changed. I mean, at the time, he hated them, wanted to, you know, because of the fear that they ensconced in him, and he was frightened and angry. But over the years, he's got to look back. He's looked back and says, wait a minute, I think this was all a big mistake. That when he ran out into the woods and ran into that beam of light, it was some kind of radiation, and it practically killed him. And them abducting him, and he believes this now, and this is not his words, but it's a paraphrase of his words. He believes they were trying their best to save his life because it was an accidental, say, a radiation exposure. And so he says he believes that now. At the time, he thought they were experimenting on him and doing all this crazy crap, but he says, now I believe they were just trying to save my life because this shouldn't have happened.
Yes.
Now to hear Parker from the Pascagoula abductions, oh, my mind just went blank. He still has a hatred for them. And in one of his revisits with the entities, he said he actually attacked them at one time and was strangling them and beating their head up against the wall. He was getting violent with them because he was just, he said he was just so angry of having been picked up so many times throughout his life. That one incident in 1973 was like the beginning. And he said it's been going on his entire life, and he's just fed up. Okay. That in British Columbia in January the 1st, 1970.
Yes.
And you have another story, a New Year's Eve story?
Oh, yes. In Bladenboro, North Carolina, around this time of the year in between 1953 and 1954, there were a string of animal deaths that were
Wow.
rather mysterious. There were some people who ended up having their dogs were attacked and
Mm.
killed, and uh, December 31st, 1953, there were two dogs that were found dead, and they were both laying in large puddles of blood.
Oh, God.
And both dogs were described as being torn into ribbons and crushed. And then the next day, on New Year's Day, 1954, two more dogs were found at another nearby farm. And then during the night of January 2nd, another dog turned up that had been killed. And
Crazy.
then January 3rd, there were two more dogs that were found killed. And in one case, an autopsy was performed on one of those dogs killed on the 3rd. And the autopsy reported there wasn't more than 2 or 3 drops of blood in him. And that it also
Wow.
went on to say that the dog's bottom lip had been broken open and his jawbone smashed. And then
Wow.
a few days later, a pet rabbit was found, nearly decapitated, or actually decapitated.
Mm.
And then another dog turns up dead on the 7th. And then a goat was killed a short time later, and its head had been smashed flat.
Wow.
And some of the people in the area had witnessed a an animal described as being about 4.5 feet long, bushy, and resembling either a bear or a panther. Um, Someone else described it as being small and noticed that another one just like it was running beside the
Uh-oh.
first animal that they saw.
Huh.
Um, and then they made some type of strange noise that sounded like a baby crying. Um, Someone else described the animal and said it was about 20 inches high. It had a long tail, about 14 inches. The color
Man.
of it was dark. It had a face exactly like a cat, only I ain't never seen a cat that big. And it was walking around
Wow.
stealthily and sneakily. Um,
Huh.
so um, the uh, the police chief actually decided to take its dogs and try to pursue this creature. And the night of January 3rd, they went out and they tried to hunt this creature down and reportedly tracked it for about 3 miles into a local swamp. And then on the night of January 5th, more than 500 people and dogs hunted
Wow.
through the woods and swamps for the creature. And then the next night, more than 800 people turned out.
Oh my gosh.
And they, at that point, they ended up tying up some dogs as bait. And they hoping to lure the creature to the bait, but it didn't show up. And
Mm.
then January 7th, um, uh, an- the next night, another large group of people came out, and they still weren't able to find the creature. But then a few days later, a local farmer found a bobcat in in one of the farmer's steel traps, and he shot and killed the bobcat. And he took it into town, saying that he thought that this was the creature.
Mm.
Um, but it was just this very strange creature that came up, killed all of these animals, and then kind of disappeared after that.
Wow.
Um,
I started to
and
say sounded like a chupacabra, but you said it had a
yes,
a lot of fur.
right, right. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, it very well could have been maybe a panther or a creature of that
Mm-hmm.
species. Um, there are supposedly the panthers are now extinct, except for very small areas in Florida, but there are still people
Right.
who are shooting and killing panther-like creatures.
Right.
I know that there was one here in Shreep County, Georgia, that was killed some years ago and made headlines. But these people kept saying, "Well, that's impossible. Like, it could not have been a
Yeah.
panther," and it most likely was.
Well, they've got Black Panther sightings in North Alabama.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know, so that's a very real possibility. And this was in
yes.
North Carolina.
Yes, Bladenboro, North
Yeah.
Carolina.
Wow.
That's in Bladen County, which is near the coast.
But the first week of January, what, 1954?
Well, it started just before the new
Oh,
year, so
yeah.
very late 1953 into
Yeah.
1954.
Well, I know the creature wasn't looking at the calendar and saying, "Oh, let's go celebrate New Year's." It's just kind of ironic that that this was the time that those happened, and
Yes,
that's pretty strange. That is strange. Before we close out, this was what I was asking you about.
Mhm.
This PDF, which that's a new feature that our service provides, is I can do PDFs now and slides,
Oh
you
wow.
know. But this is from 1 January 1969. I'm not going to go into all of it, but at 7:30 p.m., a Mr. Walter Webster, a salesman, and it give his address there. He's in British Columbia, so we've got two these sightings in British Columbia. Called the office advising that he had observed an unidentified flying object. Webster stated that this sighting occurred between the hours of 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Webster advised that he was en route to his residence and was traveling on Fifth Avenue in the vicinity of Alward and Burden Streets, city of Prince George, when he made the sighting. He stated that he was so astonished with what he observed that he pulled into the Fifth Avenue Shell service station and drew his observation to the attention of one Donald, I can't see that, Cox, service station attendant and customer Grant Magnuson. Cook, I think that is, and Magnuson are both residents of President. The object was described as 1/8 the size of the moon, yellowish orange in color, with a glow around same. The object appeared to have a square attachment fastened to the bottom. The top portion of the sphere had diagonal straps across it. The object showed a radiant light, and at times appeared very bright. It appeared to move and gain altitude. The altitude was estimated roughly between 2,000 and 10,000 feet. The object gave no audible sound, and the duration of the sighting was between 1 and 1.5 hours. Now, the report goes on and on into detail and the follow-up, but supposedly, this is the whole report, and this is supposedly, wait a minute, let me get a description of the picture here. Forwarded for your information with photographs of a makeshift hot air balloon, extra copies. In other words, they're saying this is a hot air balloon, but this is not what it looked like. in other words, they're saying, if you're going to say it's a hot air balloon, well, here's a hot air balloon. So never mind. That's not what it is. So, but anyway, that's the full report from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, 1 January 1969. And if if we're reporting the dates right, then this happened in British Columbia at the same time the nurses saw something.
Oh, wow.
You know, these happened at approximately the same time, the night of December 31st, or at least a year apart if I'm getting my math, if I'm getting my dates wrong. But these happened in British Columbia. All right, how do I close this out now? This is new, so I got, oh, there it is. But anyway, that's these happen. I mean, we may have to do a show in British Columbia. It's looking as weird as Ohio, which we still
Yes.
haven't done a show in Ohio. Okay, speaking of, folks, we're going to close out this strange new year, so be expecting more strangeness throughout the year, as we will be back. That I haven't decided a date yet. I've got to get with the ETs. These last few weeks and months have been so strange for me that, and I'm still trying to get all my ducks back in a row. So we will be coming back with our regular episodes. Can y'all believe we're actually going into now the first year we started in May, I think it was. And that was our season 1. Then last year we started season 2. So we're actually going to be starting season 3. Though I technically don't have to call it a season. We can call it whatever the hell we want. But that's just kind of how we've made lines of demarcation there. So we have a list of stuff that we want to go through and we want to talk about. And we will be doing that soon. So be watching. We may be back in 2 weeks. It may be 3 weeks. I'm not sure yet. But just keep watching the Facebook page and group, and you will get all your updates there. Lewis, thank you so much. I'm glad you got to be on here and share your stories. So we're going to...
Sorry I was late.
We did it, man. We made it anyway. All right. All right, Lewis, again, thank you. And all you watchers, thank you, thank you, thank you. Happy New Year, and we will see you next trip. Bye-bye.